3 days from now. So welcome to those of you also who are watching this at a different time that works for you. We're recording this whole first part of the conversation, which is the information sharing, and then we will end the recording before the question time. So your voice and questions won't be part of the public recording. Also, if you're online right now, the needs list, which you got in an email, which you got in a letter, and which we just handed out, it's also available on the website, the church website, under About Capital Campaign. So if you're looking for that right now, that's where that is. The capital campaign that we're talking about having, the idea bubbled up. Well, it's been bubbling up for a while because we had different projects around the church that were inviting our attention, even before the ceiling fell in. We had an organ committee, which was composed of 11 people or so. Fred Bruschetti and Pete Mitchell chaired it. Lyndon Rayton, Vinnie Wells, Bob Wilson, George Schell, Annie Junkin, Ellen Exner, John McCausland. At least a couple of those people don't worship with us regularly anymore. It's been a while, but that committee did good work a couple of years ago, before the pandemic. And so we knew that there was this curiosity and hunger for an organ that could better serve our worship here. And so that is coming in, or was bubbling up. And we knew, we've been told for 20 years or so, that our windows, our stained glass windows, are slumping, which they do naturally from the moment they go in. And so we had multiple reports in hand about the costs and timeline and logistics for fixing up the windows. The conversation about how accessible our space is something that has been responded to by this parish faithfully multiple times, multiple layers, multiple renovations, multiple out front conversations. So parts of what is offered up, is explored in this capital campaign idea, have been bubbling up for a while, and then the ceiling fell down. Part of the ceiling. Right there, and some of you will remember seeing that one way or another, even though it happened while we were all out of the building. But it was sort of where those 3 lamps are, and left a little dent in the organ bench. And then other pieces sort of, like, you took a picture and then 2 weeks later you took another picture and you said, that's actively moving too. So we have had this whole space, if you didn't get this yet, this whole space was replastered, a coat over the old plaster, and watch the wonderful videos that John Gaffar put together, and George Schell narrated a lot of and gave us info on that. You can watch those all on our YouTube site. Repainted, the narthex was repainted, the lighting, and we took out a loan from the diocese to fund most of that work. So we knew we had to do some fundraising, a capital campaign, to repay the loan. And we said, maybe if we're going to be doing that work, this is the time to respond to some of these other things that have been bubbling up. And so that's what we offered up in the survey and the listening sessions, and that's what we're bringing back to you today. I should say, after the ceiling collapsed, I really want to thank George Schell and Paul Carey and Clark Kidder, who put in, and others as well, but especially you 3, who put in so many hours, really kind of clerk up the works and that process through, because it involved a lot of pieces. So the vestry read up on what you have to do to prepare for a capital campaign. Bob Wilson came forward very generously with his gifts in having done capital campaigns and said, if you're looking at one, here's kind of the scope of things. But the vestry and the parish need to figure out what belongs in the campaign. I'll jump in for the fundraising. And so the vestry undertook that exploration, and the input team that created the survey, and that was Ted Deers, Billy Wells, Betsy Wilder, Kurt Stuke, Steve Largy, and myself. And then a projects team arose out of the vestry from the feedback from that. And so the projects team was commissioned to go and get the further details you asked for. Melissa Trafton, Clark Kidder, Patricia Kegel, George Schell, Jeff Collins, support from Bert Cooper. I share these names so that to reflect that a lot of you have already put in a lot of good giftedness, gifted work for this exploration. Even if you're someone who hasn't had a chance to kind of lay your hands on these plans yet, please know it's been a group exploration already. And so the projects team received architects' proposals. They met with an accessibility consultant, talked with the state highway department, met with the town, because if you're talking about out front and where the property lines are and connecting with plans that are being made the next sidewalk over, and now, and gathering up all those other things that have bubbled up through the last number of years, now we're excited to get to the part we thought was like kind of tomorrow, and then it turned out there was a lot of prep work. We're excited to finally get to the part where we get to say, here's all the stuff that we learned. So this is the offering forth of the fruit of the projects team. And today is an informational session where we're going to share that, and we want to invite all the questions you have. Wait, that wasn't clear. Did you explore this? Did you think about this? I noticed this. Can you say more about this? Questions. But today is not a format for your feedback, your preferences and responses. Just not built for that. We do want that. And so you'll get a response form, which we're going to send out by email, we'll send out by mail, we'll put it on the website. Please do respond with your feelings about the different pieces of the prospective campaign. We're going to send that out immediately after the last info session next Sunday. So today, questions. And now we'll turn to, and I should say the response form. When you get the response form, we have intentionally conceived it not as a form on which to vote or on which to rank your choices. We're asking you to look at each piece of the prospective campaign and respond with your feelings about it on its own, for its own value, for us being the people of God here today. The piece about can we afford this, the piece about what if we need to rank these, that's something that Bob Wilson will lead us in discovering as part of his work after we say whether these things are a faithful response to God right here, right now. So that's what the response form will be about. Just when you get it, have that in mind. Now we're going to turn to an overview of the different projects. We'll walk through each of the projects, the identified need and the proposed response. And once we've walked through them all, then we'll turn and take questions, and we'll stop the recording and we'll take questions in the same order. Am I on? And paper. Yes. When we get through all of them, you might need to remember what you were thinking about. 1, 2, 3, 4. So the first project, the first need identified is repaying the loan, which saying repaying a loan doesn't sound very exciting, but what we're really doing is funding the beauty that we're worshiping in already. And not just beauty, but stability and warmth and new lighting and the other pieces of this that are kind of invisible. New internet lines in this space, new wireless capability that meshes all the way through the church, which has already served our ministry well. New fire alarms, new smoke alarms in here and up above. The steeple was leaking, which was sort of a long slope. You all know how water is, long slope problem. All of that was incorporated into this space because once you touch one thing, you kind of had to touch the other. We have no more knob and tube wiring, which is a gift. So a lot of things we've just done are kind of a gift to the next 150 years of people who worship in this space. That's the first project item, and the total cost of that is $145,000, right about there. And it's exciting to say also that we already received towards the insulation part of that about a little more than $29,000 in a diocesan grant for an energy efficiency grant. So it's $145,000 total, sort of in terms of what we need to raise, minus $29,000. Other people who were part of that, is there something I left out, George or Clark or Paul, that you would add about that? So that's the first identified need, is that repayment. Need number two, the stained glass windows and the glass windows, which we have 3 of here and 1 up above the back organ, tending to those. The stained glass windows are about 120 to 125 years old. And what I learned, getting to be director of a building with stained glass, is that as soon as you put stained glass windows up, they start to come down. Gravity just pulls them down, and that's understood in the art form. And so these have had multiple, you see the kind of rods that are across them. There's metal ties that are in the lead of the window and that come out and wrap around the bars. So there's some strengthening that's been done. There used to be an opening window sash there where it says Talitha Kumi, but that's been sealed shut. There have been all the kinds of things you very normally expect to do with a stained glass window, and the congregation has been faithful in responding to that. And then there comes a point where stained glass needs a full rehab. And so they take the proposal that we've received is to take the stained glass windows fully out, take them off-site. They come completely apart. They're put together with new lead, and they're cleaned in this process, photographed. They come back to us and are reinstalled. And the proposal we're putting forward is to put them right back where they are now, replace them, but with a renewed strength, a new 100-year lease on windows. And for the clear windows none of them function right now. They function for light, but they don't function for air. And they used to. And so the company that we found is in Warner. They restored all the windows in First Church just about 1.5 years ago. And First Church is very pleased with that work. They would take the windows, strip down the wood back to bare wood. They would replace any of the panes that have broken, and they would also replace the panes that broke sometime in the past and were replaced with a sort of contemporary glass. They have old glass to match the original glass. So by the time they came back to us, both the broken or sort of contemporary panes would all be looking like the original panes. And the windows would be functional again. They'd come back, and the proposal is to have storm windows installed on all of our windows. The ones on the stained glass windows are vented. They're really there for physical protection of the window, not for everyone. They kind of say, and some energy efficiency, but they have to be vented or you get condensation. So energy efficiency, as I read the reports, is not a strength of the storm windows, but they are protective of the physical window. And for you notice, this isn't something you've maybe seen, or some of you who are particular will have noticed, the Lexan that covers our windows right now, some of it is clear, some of it is sort of a clouded yellow. It'll all be clear. You'll see the full windows. And the storm windows for the clear glass, you can see that clear glass window. It has muntins and mullions. The muntins are the little pieces of wood between the 6 panes. The mullions are the thicker pieces, ribs that go up between the 3 sections. The storm windows will go between the mullions. So there'll be 3 kind of tracks of storm window. So we allow the architecture of the window to stand out a little more than it does now. And also, if we choose to open the windows, we can actually remove the storm windows from the lower section and let air through. The company that the vestry looked at, got quotes from multiple companies for this, and the company that we're offering forward as the best choice is out of Massachusetts. It's a couple and a couple of their children, and they would take one or a couple windows at a time, and then they'd come back.
For the stained glass.
For the stained glass, yes, sorry. That's right, yeah, and one example being All Saints in Peterborough, who is very pleased with the work of that company, Ken Paulson Company. Yeah. The third project identified need is the organ, and George Schell and Annie Junkin, who were on the original organ committee, they both stepped forward wonderfully to sort of do that last leg of work, assisted by Susan, our organist, the last leg of work to kind of bring the organ report forward again. And George, you're prepared to speak, to share a little bit about the organ. I've got pictures of the proposed organ. Please, yeah, if you come up here, then the people online can hear you as well, and for the recording.
Thank you, Reed. So this project has been going on for several years, of which Fred Bertretti was one of the original co-chairs. I think it's been 2 years, about 2 years now. And the original proposal or recommendation to the vestry back then still exists today, that we didn't change anything. We've done our due diligence. We've actually went to Vermont to inspect this organ that we've recommended to the vestry. I've heard from various sources that the $85,000 to have the organ, this one removed, traded in for $3,000, and this one would be completely removed, and the other organ in Vermont right now would be installed, tuned up. It would be rehabbed and up and running for the $85,000. And I've heard from several different sources that anything under $100,000 is pretty amazing these days, and upwards of $125,000 is unheard of for what we are proposing to have completed here. So I'm not an organist or that much of a musician, but this organ is limited in that basically it only has the one manual, the one keyboard, and you see some of these organs with like 4 or 5 keyboards or whatever. So Susan could speak to the limitations of something like that if she, if you're interested in hearing something like that. But this new organ which is another Hook and Hastings out of Boston. It's 120 years old, but David Moore would go through it. He would completely tune it up. He'd fix anything that's broken in it. It'd be basically like a new organ. This has been altered over the years. The pipes have been changed, and I don't know about the internal. So I've heard people say that they didn't know if we can actually consider this a true Hook and Hastings anymore because of the different variations and alterations that it's been made over the years. The dimensions are a little bit different, which would come into play when the flooring and this area is reconstructed, but there wouldn't be any problem with fitting it in. So, and I know that Susan's not playing some parts of this organ right now because there's some limitations there. So, so I think, and this was actually brought about by our prior organist, who was he was very instrumental in getting this off the ground. He saw a need there. So, but we've made the recommendation for $85,000, and I think it's a good price.
This is This is, let's see, yep. These are a couple pictures of the organ as it's, erected halfway in the space of the organ worker up in Vermont. It's another Hook and Hastings, so it looks physically similar. But this Hook and Hastings hasn't had the guts reworked multiple times. It provides the same sound that it originally did, which is as you say, a sound that accompanies our breadth of musical repertoire better than this, which was tuned to a particular taste about 25 years ago and plays a more limited repertoire, really.
Susan, would you care to offer anything as far as the limitations of this?
As you can see, it has 2 keyboards instead of 1, which, for instance, this morning when
Susan, just for the microphone.
I'm sorry.
Yep.
I'm still holding my lunch. This organ has 2 keyboards instead of 1, which is good for today. I played the Alleluia, and I can't pull out stops and push them in fast enough so the choir sang the verse a cappella, because the choir is good enough to do that. But otherwise, it's just too loud for some things and too soft for other things. When you've got 2 keyboards like that, it's very easy to switch, because it's like an orchestra. It's like, okay, you flutes, you're going to play now. Okay, you trombones, you're going to play now. It's kind of like that. Every time you pull out a stop, you're picking a piece of an orchestra to play for you. The other thing is this organ has a skull shoe, which you can't see. This one has a hitch down, and there's a little knob over there if you see, and if your foot slips off, it slams shut. Same thing with the organ. That's part of the charm of these old organs, but it's not easy to use when you're directing a choir and your leg is way over here, and your hand is way over here, and you're trying to play with the other foot in your right hand. This swell shoe is properly placed, and it's only because this organ is so much older. And so that's much easier when you've got dynamics like this Ave Maria that we did this morning. I could do really soft and I can be really loud, and I can then make it, it's just like a gas pedal. You can go faster with the car, you can make it louder with the organ. And that is a benefit for dynamics to get all that in between. And the other thing is this organ is original. Very much original, and it's got very sweet sounds on it. And she may be pretty, but she's inside, she's all messed up. You know? And she's had different people working and taking pipes out and swapping them for other pipes that aren't as good. And some of them are just really bad. And I had one rank on this organ. I stopped using it because Reed's son would just start screaming his head off every time I pulled that stop out. It was so shrill and so bad. And then he would lead all the other kids in the nursery as well. So that's a stop that's useless. And the organ builder said the same. It's just very bad. It's been pipes that have been cut up and made into something that they're not. And it's just like a bad operation, you know. So but this is not much bigger space-wise. It won't take up too much more of an impact here.
It comes just about to here.
And then it comes out a little bit more. So I like the fact that there's very little impact on this altar area. That's for somebody else to do. So I just wanted to be sure that, you know, I just want this to be low impact for everybody, but have something that will be valuable. The other thing is it has a reed. We'll have 2 reeds in the congregation. And reeds are what you do when you play an instrument that has like an oboe or a clarinet or a trumpet. These are what they call reeds in the organ business. And he's throwing this one in at a very good price. They're very expensive. And this will add a lot of pizzazz to the hymns, and it also will be enclosed in that swell box I talked about, so you can have it be very soft and mellow and accompany it like I do over at First Church. I have a ball over there. So now I can do that here too if I have the oboe. It's a really good reed to have if you only have one. And and it's a read from an old organ, and he's like the Cadillac of organ builders in the 19th century. And this will be a nice fit to be adding into this instrument. And everything has been replaced. The trackers will be new.
That's the linkage between
That's
the
right.
physical action of the keyboard and the physical valve under the pipe.
And you can see more here too, the stickers. And he has retabled the chest, which is the air that goes in, and they need to have new letters every 100 years. And so he is making everything just like it came out of a shop in 1900. And he's really quite a craftsman. I'll say about this organ builder is that he's putting organs in Australia and in Germany, and he's a very unassuming man, but he's in quite demand all over the world, really. He's always traveling. And so I have respect for him very much. I don't really know him well personally, but I just know him as an artisan. So have I said enough?
Thanks. Yeah, we'll find out when we go to questions.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, George. Thank you, Annie. Thank you, Susan. Thank you to the whole organ committee for the work done in the past. Number 5 on our list of needs is about access. It's about, well, and multiple pieces of access. And I'm going to welcome forward Melissa Trafton, who has chaired the projects team, who regathered the organ committee and who has done amazing work, endless work, connecting to all these different architects and consultants and gathering the projects team.
Yeah.
So my reason why we're doing this work, Senator Jackson out, that you can turn it up, but not because the insulation isn't there right now. It's starting to come this week, but you may notice that the furnace just runs and runs. Although I don't know running now.
It's not running.
But now it's 6 degrees. The problem is what gas right now. The furnace can't get something
When it's hot, like that in a pit. Okay, so good morning. I'm going to speak to you about the next 3 subjects, the sort of altar and chancel accessibility, seating, accessible seating, and the front entrance. And I just want to say those were the 3 most ambiguous of this sort of task, because you know, and so in trying to figure out potential solutions, the projects team took to heart what the feedback we felt that we received last summer, which was, don't change the look of the church, don't mess with its historic quality, address the problems that we have now, that we know we are facing, and try not to make problems for the future, which is, of course, difficult. So we took that as our sort of working model. How can we keep the look the same, address the problems we know we have now, and do our best that we're not causing more problems in that process, which is, of course, always what you fear. So the first question was access to the altar rail, use of the space in the chancel for the choir, for lay Eucharistic ministers, for priests and other people serving up here. We have 5 levels up here. We have the raised altar. We have the level that the sort of communion rail rests on now, and then we have 3 steps here. We know already that these steps cause lots of problems for a number of people in our congregation of getting up to receive communion. We know that people serving up here are constantly aware of stepping up, stepping down, watching their feet, tripping, and certainly this would be impossible, if not difficult, depending on mobility of a priest or someone who wanted to serve up there who either had trouble with steps, was in a wheelchair. So, but of course, we were afraid that the solution would not be elegant, and we brought in a number of architects, received a number of solutions, and received a solution that we felt was elegant, would not look that different, and would solve a number of these problems. And so what you're seeing is on the screen, the detail of the architectural drawing. So these are the front box pews here. Here's the pulpit. Here's the raised, it goes beyond. So this curved wall here is the back wall. This is where the altar is raised. And then currently, the communion rail, the altar rail, is right about here. So the proposal of this architect was to leave the altar raised, so widen the platform slightly on which the altar is to allow for more ministers to be up there comfortably without being elbowing people off on either side. And then to level everything else to a single raised platform. So this whole section would still be raised as it is now, but it would be one level instead of multiple levels, which would mean that this space, people wouldn't have to watch their feet quite as much. If they had trouble with steps, they could still negotiate the space. If we had a priest in a wheelchair, someone who needed to get there, a person could serve here, all of that. So the communion rail would then move out to about here. So there would be a much wider space within. And the congregation, it would be about a 7-inch platform, a 7-inch rise, this whole level, which would be the same level as what the choir is sitting on now. The communion rail would be here, and the congregation to receive communion would stay on the floor level, come up, stand or kneel at the communion rail here. So if you were in the congregation, you would remain on the same level. So that would bring all of this to a single step. The opening in the rail would still be here. It would still be a single step. And so we're figuring out a way in which that could be managed by a sort of temporary ramp or another ramp to get up that one step. But we have reduced the level to just the single 7-inch rise. Have I
were pointing out that in the rail, so the rail in a sense kind of expands outward, right?
Yeah, it's
And
sort of just,
some of it expands to the front and some of it
Oh, yeah.
expands to the side. So there's also space along here. And if you can visualize that one step of the platform in 7 inches is what you kneel on.
Right.
Just the way that right now you actually kneel on the outer edge of the platform where the rail is now. So the standing, kneeling communion space would be along here and here.
and so that would be higher than what we have now, which would also be easier. That would be just that single step. So that's the architectural plan. This is a drawing of what that would look like. And I probably should have showed you this first and from the other side. So this is from the choir looking over. So we felt that the appearance from the pews would actually not visually change very much. Study that said we brought in George Sharp, and he's like, we would just use the railing and just move it out slightly. Let me just make sure. I have everything. So yes, so it would remove the need to use steps for seed communion. It would expand the space within the railing to make it a more flexible space and also without a variety of levels. I think that's all. Okay, so there'll be questions later. But the next question, yes, and so this is one more view of that. The next thing that we addressed was seating for people with wheelchairs, people with other assistive devices like walkers, and access. Right now, we have the single space, which is in the back near where the font is. That's not really an ideal space if you're in a wheelchair, because it means that anytime anybody is standing during a service, especially something crowded like a funeral or a wedding, you're seated at the back of the church. And so putting a wheelchair seating, first of all, in a kind of limited way, especially since the font is back there, but also at the back of the space is not ideal. So the suggestion that we received, again, just remembering, we received a lot of suggestions, a lot of which we thought were not the vision that we have for keeping the church looking the same. But the suggestion that we received that we felt was most in keeping with the appearance of the structure is to move essentially this first box. So front, back, and seat to the back. So keeping the same number of pews on this side, but expanding the space here. So essentially stealing the space from the back by putting the pew there and using that space up front instead. That would, of course, be much better in terms of the pathway out of the church after church, which this has now become a way that lots of people enter and exit the church. And what it would leave was the pew behind Reed, where Reed is sitting right now, for those of you online, open without a front part. So it would be a bench that was open, which a wheelchair, either someone with a walker or some other assistive device could use, as well as someone could sit in accompanying a wheelchair. So wheelchair could be there, seated next to the companion who could sit on the bench. It would also be placed there, and we've checked the sight lines because of the pulpit and all that, very conveniently to the restrooms, to the elevator. This side of the churches would be the best place for that. So that seemed to be the sort of best place to relocate wheelchair seating from the back of the church, although there would still remain space there if someone wanted to be there, and sort of stealing that space for the front. There also was a suggestion to take one pew here and make it accessible also for a wheelchair. So that would be another option, again, in the front on this side, on the elevator side of the church. Did I forget anything?
Maybe just worth saying that the suggestion for the other one to visualize it was, instead of having an open fronted pew middle where sort of everyone walks past, you'd be exposed in a way that people with legs like mine are not. To have a kind of equity of experience, that the front would stay. The suggestion from the architect is to cut out this half bench, and then you gain a space where, and you can open this up here, so that the wheelchair can come right in. And again, you have a space where you can be right next to your neighbor in Christ, your neighbor from your family, and have an equal experience of that.
Yeah.
So, and also to have two gives short or free if people want to sit the back. In fact, they can have choice, or just because your mobility changed, this means you lost the choice that you had when you had right side kind.
Great. Okay, so the third topic that we addressed was the front of the church. And there we felt that we were dealing with multiple issues. Here's the front of our church as it looks now. We were dealing with the unevenness of our front stairs and the different depths of tread and the fact that they are irregular and sloping to one side. The use of the sidewalks accessing the front. The sidewalk as it exists is uneven in its surface as well as not ADA wide. So, for example, I needed to help someone attending Pam McDonald's funeral try to get down that sidewalk using a walker, and it was an extremely difficult process. So making it wide enough, smooth enough, providing either handicap accessible parking or drop-off space. We're sort of negotiating that with the state so that people can be dropped off closer to the front entrance and also not get out into an ice field. So solve the drainage along the street as well as a drop-off that provides an accessible way for someone to walk safely or to the front of the church. And then the fourth component of that is to think about our handicap ramp, and I know the history of that, but its surface is uneven. It does not have a rail. The way in which it is laid, the gaps between the stones provide a difficult, surface to navigate. And so relaying that or creating it in such a way that it is more usable and also dealing with the sort of aesthetic elements of making it obvious to people the easiest way to enter the front, that the front is accessible, and that one can, how to sort of navigate that, make it graceful and beautiful, but also make it clear the best way to enter the church. And I did actually have someone pull up as I was talking to the landscape architect and say to me, "I love your church. It is such a beautiful space. I'd love to show my father it. Can I bring him in?" And we said, "Yes." And she said, "Where's the handicap entrance?" And I said, "Well, the ramp is right here." And she said, "He can't do that." And they drove off. And so to make it clear to people that we have thought about this. So we brought in a landscape architect, and the proposal she had basically is to create a slightly larger landing when you walk out the front doors, and off of that to have a ramp, and use our existing granite steps, but just recut them and reset them so that they are even, and then to put in a handicap space or parking and deal with the drainage and a ramp that and sidewalk that sort of more gracefully blend into the surroundings. What we've learned is that, and some of you may know this, but this was at one point one half of Main Street. And Main Street was a divided road, and there were two streets, and that is why we are so low, and why the drainage is such a problem, because it, and if you look at the historic photos, the front door used to be so far up off of the front, and that is because the road was in a different place, and what we're trying to navigate is the old roadway. So I think
I'd like to say good things to projects team and Vestry that you actually did get some landscape drawings.
yes,
But we're not showing dealing with today because the conversation is ongoing with the state, you know, like, we're gonna have first cuts here. It wasn't, the investor thought it wasn't worth showing you pictures, which, you know, lodge in our minds, and then we say, oh, well, no, it's not that. But that level of investigation has been done. And that just needs to have the conversation with the town about, you know, an integrated Main Street sidewalk and just that those extra layers need to go through before we can bring a drawing back that's, you know, looks more like what we could actually do.
Yeah, just to say that both the town and the immediate neighbors are very enthusiastic about this. The Hopkinton Village Precinct is sort of addressing sidewalks within the village as a whole. And so they are very open to, you know, are rethinking this as well. So I think that's all I've got for this part.
I really can't give enough thanks, Melissa, to you and all the people on the project team who have met many times and made many calls, and all of you who are trying to work with contractors right now, you know how many calls it takes to get one contractor, never mind 2 architects, 2 landscape people, an accessibility consultant. And really, thank you. It's been fun for me, selfishly, just exciting. The final thing, the final identified need, this is another one of those things that's been simmering somewhere, is the idea of solar power for the church. We have some really magnificent roof access to the sun that's sitting there with sun on it all the time. It just doesn't have any photovoltaics. The proposal that we received for the solar would fully offset our electrical use, which means an annual savings, so you have this, an annual savings electricity of a little over $2,200. So when you do that, you immediately release $2,200 a year for other ministry. And also there's, in terms of the earth sending us messages, we would offset 27,000 pounds of CO2 equivalent a year, 13 tons of CO2, 14 tons of CO2 that wouldn't be going into the atmosphere each year. The math on these kind of things, you can imagine, rebates, selling the value of your renewable credits, et cetera, is a little bit, it's all very scientific, and I've seen all the numbers and how it all plays out, and it's all lots of charts. We chose not to show that to you, but the simple payback, as they sum it up, the simple payback financially is 17 years. So if you say, you know, if you say, okay, the total cost of this is $50,000, and we make $2,200 a year, that math doesn't work. No, that math doesn't work. But the simple payback with everything integrated is 17 years. And that releases ministry. It helps the earth be a place where we all can live together. It respects God's creation. And in terms of lifespan, it's a 40-year commercial lifespan on the installation. So, and they still work after that, but it's 40 years, but they kind of guarantee you continue to get that full benefit from the sun, and the panels haven't, you know, even started to degrade much at all. They continue to work after that even. Where do we go? This is the proposal that we're offering forward that seems like the best fit. They would go, are you oriented here? You're on Main Street, looking at the church. Here's the memorial garden. And they would go across the front face of the parish house. And they would go across the inward face of the sheep run. Right there. This is our best exposure in terms of solar, is the roof of this building facing toward the garden, except they built this 200 years ago and they weren't planning on solar. So structurally, it's just a no-go. We could actually put double our solar need on the ceiling and go nuts with heat pumps and everything, but it just, these are the roofs where structurally we can handle it and get good exposure. That is the list of our identified needs and the responses that have been carefully looked through and brought forward and collected. And thank you for coming to receive this information and bring your curiosity. We're gonna now we'll stop the recording and go into a question time, going through the same order. If you're online and this is the last part of the video for you, goodbye, peace be with you. But if you're online today live, you can stay.